just two more very brief announcements, and then Ken Bohnsack will be the master of the ceremonies here today. Okay, any of you have cars that are parked, that you're parking cars? There is an inexpensive parking lot on the street behind the Essex Hotel, where it's $12 a day instead of $20 at the Essex. You might go there. I see a lot of you taking notes. That's great. I stopped taking them when I realized we're going to have all this on audio recording, and they're going to be available very quickly after the conference. Chris has told me he's going to get the entire conference on 4 CDs, and we'll make it available at a reasonable price. Very reasonable. And one other thing, I'm asking all of the speakers to get me a copy of their talks through email so that we can actually print it up. One of the people here suggested we should have this in printed form, at least electronically printed, all of these talks. They were so impressed with the talks so far that I think that's a good idea. So I will, if you're one of the speakers, please email me your written talk at some point as soon as you can, and we'll put it all together. Now, Ken Bohnsack, who is one of AMI's advisors and the founder of the sovereignty movement, and has brought many people into this room. And Ken's talk yesterday hit on some things. One of the things we hope to do, and it's always a question of financing, is have somebody in Washington, D.C., or at least part of the time there, to be able to walk into congressional offices and educate them. And Ken, it would be wonderful if we could get Ken to be working on that. So anyway, he's going to be the master of ceremonies here, and I'll turn now the program over to Ken.
Yesterday, I had to excuse myself as I was going up to Wisconsin to celebrate the 100th birthday of my uncle's business. And one of the things that I was aware of that I want to share with you, because it leads right into our speaker, who's going to talk about agriculture. The year was in 1934 or 35 when my cousin, who was then running the show at the hardware store, found that the company was bankrupt. And he talked to his dad, my uncle, and he said, "What should we do?" And he said, "Well, I know we're bankrupt and everybody else in town knows we are, so you better go to the bank and see what they say." He went to the bank and outlined the problem, and then he said, "Should I go bankrupt?" And the banker said, "If you do, I will shoot you." And the reason why is because if you do, all these other businesses in town will also, and so will this bank. Instead, here comes a subject, in a way, what we're talking about, how you can relate this, is still another way to what our subject here is this weekend. He said, the banker said, that rural electrification projects have started. Farmers need electricity. They need lights in their barn. They need lights in their houses. They want and will want the appliances that are electric, from dishwashers and toasters and everything else. That's what you can sell. And sure enough, they started to do it. Now, at the time, and again, you can hear this relationship. The farmers weren't any better off either. And so, but they still wanted these things. The need was there. The money was missing. So my cousin said, "I got paid in chickens, and in eggs, and in vegetables." Now there were times, and there was more than one, when the farmer took me out back and said, "Come on, I'll get you paid. Take that shovel." And they shoveled in the manure pile and unearthed the jars of cash. But he said it was a rough time. But after getting the chickens and the eggs, then he had to sell them to get money. But you see, the need was there. The only thing missing was money. Randy Cook is the president of the National Order of Raw Materials. And he's going to talk to us today about the relation between raw material production and the money system. He began in 1936, beginning in 1936, Norm has studied the nation's economic record, submitted legislation, and taught the realities and methods of what it calls par economy, and publishes its annual economic report of the producers. He presents the evidence for their conclusion that money growth should be based on this production, and how this can be done. For example, in agriculture, through a revitalized farm parity program. Your attention now is to Randy Cook.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate that observation on what was happening back in the Depression, as we call it, the Great Depression. How many people are here? We got about 40? I think we had about 50 this morning.
There's about 65, 60 is the actual count.
Oh, okay. Well, that helps me out. That makes the math easy. Everybody had something to eat for lunch, right? Okay. Well, we're conferring here to determine how to reform our corrupt and discriminatory money system. And I'm here to draw a circle around the fact that the fundamental need for reformation stems from the economic damage inflicted by our unsustainable bad money system and its perpetuating public policies. Fixing our money system will not automatically fix our bad economic policies. Our nation has had successful experiences with sustainable, prosperity-engendering economic policies that delivered the operational essence of a good money system, meaning constant purchasing power over time and equitable distribution of wealth. Our problem has been growing debt and the changes in our institutional arrangements which that debt forces. Now, keeping in mind that our nation's seasonal harvest has already begun, how many here have personally grew something they ate? That's excellent. Those are hours of labor put directly into producing some perishable wealth. Now, how many here put some hours of labor into producing perishable wealth for other people? Very good. You know, this is, as of 2004, there were only 7.5 people in every 1,000 that were employed in agriculture. Now, I'm not talking about farmers, that's employed in agriculture. Farmers is a smaller number. So at that rate, there shouldn't be, this group would have to be about 2 2/3 times larger to have one person employed in agriculture. So agriculture is well represented here, producers of agricultural products. Is there anyone in this room who is competent to feed 150 people 3 times a day, 365 days a year, while experiencing a net negative return on investment? Not a thing. Just hit the space bar. Oh, it was reactive. We got to go backwards. It was half asleep. The computer was half asleep, so we got to back up. I'm back up. Yep. Right. We're getting there. Oh. Gotcha. We'll start it again. Now it's going backwards that way. Okay. Crank it up. Well, I got a chart here eventually of agricultural employment as a percentage of population.
That's backwards.
In 1946 through 2004, less than 1%, and that's employed in agriculture. That's not farming numbers, farmer numbers. Now, as for the net negative return on investment, this is a piece I pulled out of the Farm Bureau paper. Is anybody familiar with Farm Bureau? Yeah, I call it Farm Bureau because that's kind of what it is. It's an insurance company that owns a farm organization that organizes farmers so they can't get organized. It's what this says here. It talks about the Agriculture Department issued a report predicting that net farm income will decrease 26% this year, 2006. Now, if you read through this far enough, you come up with some numbers down here, which I've extracted over there. They say that cash expenses are expected to rise to that number, $236.8 billion. And that gross sales of agricultural products are expected to fall to that number, $235.3 billion. That means there's a net loss there of $1.5 billion, and that does the cash. That's just cash expenses. That's not mortgage debt, operating loan debt, all the rest of the debt that's on agriculture. But that's gross sales. That's as much as you can get out of agriculture. That's production times price equals income. And yet they're saying that the net income of agriculture will be $54.4 billion. This is USDA talking to us. So that's the net negative return on investment. Anybody want to answer that question? 150 people, 3 times a day, 365 days a year. Anybody competent to perform that work? Yeah, I'm not either. I'm talking about the flywheel, the balance wheel of our national economy. Our national economy. Not just agriculture. The whole economy, the balance wheel, the flywheel, the original place that it comes from is agriculture. The primary power source of our nation. It's our domestic agriculture. When we talk about economics, we need to get certain concepts defined so that we can communicate clearly. We need to define wealth, capital, money, and interest. Let's start with wealth. Wealth, and we've had a lot of presentation on Frederick Soddy, and I want to stick with that. That's been, Chuck Walters found that book many, many years ago and has added it into the norm analysis of economic operation, and it's the perfect fit because that's what Carl Wilkin, one of the founders of the Raw Materials National Council in 1936, which evolved into NORM these days, the National Organization for Raw Materials. Wealth, let's define it as a flow of energy that empowers human life. Does anybody have a problem with that? Not things necessarily. It's a flow of energy. And it starts with the sun. This is what Frederick Soddy pointed out. The sun debited, the earth credited. The earth debited, man credited. All of that is free. There is no charge on it. There are 2 categories, 2 general categories of wealth. We have perishable wealth and we have permanent wealth. The first, the perishable wealth, provides energy to us through consumption. We ate something for lunch. We got a boost of energy. We're sitting here, we're still conscious. We got some energy out of that. And that wealth was only of use to us in that we were able to consume it. And our bodies can make use of it. Now, permanent wealth, in the same sense, as we create a permanent piece of wealth, it's already consumed when it's produced. All of the energy that's in there in that permanent piece of wealth is only of use to us as the energy stays in that piece of wealth. As it begins, it's like a house. A house is a piece of wealth. It's shelter to us. But as we build it, there's energy in there. There's stress in that house. And as that stress comes out over time, the house falls down. That's the entropy idea, absolutely. Yeah. And so the permanent wealth is of use to us in that the energy doesn't come out of it. So the longevity of that, that's why it's called permanent wealth, but it's already fully consumed when it's produced. It is a consumed product. When we use permanent wealth to produce more wealth, it provides us a human labor time savings. It's the multiplier. We can multiply our time through these pieces of permanent wealth. Maybe this is a little esoteric for everybody, I don't know. Capital, we're going to define as an agent of production, as is labor. And here's a quote for you, if anybody can tell me where this came from. Capital is only the fruit of labor and could never have existed if labor had not first existed. Labor is the superior of capital and deserves much the higher consideration. That was Abraham Lincoln. His annual message to Congress in 1861. And he went on, by the way, to say that let those who toil up from simple beginnings beware of losing a right which they already possess, which if they surrender will be used to close the doors of advancement upon such as they, and to fix further burdens upon us until all of liberty shall be lost. Where do we stand today? Yeah, all of our liberty is near lost. So, we have to define money. My definition is simply that money is the wealth distribution mechanism. Interest. Let's define interest as a physical basis, which is a payment in hire of permanent pieces of wealth when used in producing more wealth. Not just because they're sitting there, but they have to be used in producing more wealth, either perishable or permanent. And if we're proposing our monetary reforms here, let us make sure we do not extend the idea of interest beyond this, right here. And I mean do not extend it to the idea or the practice of payments in lieu of non-repayment of any debt.
Could you repeat your definition again?
Yeah, payment in hire of permanent wealth when used to create more wealth. Now I've got, we can draw all of these pieces together, hook all these definitions together in one useful piece, very useful piece. I'm going to quote at length here from Frederick Soddy's Wealth, Virtual Wealth, and Debt. And if anybody wants to look this up, it's in his second edition book, which was published in 1933, with a forward to the second edition, a forward, a message to the American nation, he called it. He reissued, re-edited, and updated his book in 1933 and sent it off with good luck to the United States. And that was, of course, right at the depth of the Great Depression. And he identified the same thing that Hollis did, that it was a money problem. It's just a flat-out money problem. That's what Ken was talking about during the introduction. The Great Depression, we had all the resources, we had all the labor, we had all the tools of production. We couldn't get anything going because the money wasn't there. The Fed had pulled the string, and that's the way it was. There's no money to transact the wealth that was still being produced. At least on the farms it was. Now here's Soddy's piece. Let me read this to you. The use of capital saves time or increases the output of wealth. I use the word or in there. It saves time or increases the output of wealth. And insofar as its return is taken in the one form, so much the less is available of the other. But the limit of production of wealth is fixed by the state of scientific and technical knowledge and business organization and the number of possible working hours in the day. Once the capital necessary to enable the workers to employ the methods of production, which are dictated by the state of technical development, has been accumulated, further accumulation is sheer waste. It can only be used by lengthening the hours of work, and then only to the extent of human endurance. The apparent perpetual productivity of capital wealth and its superiority over consumable wealth in this respect leads always to the covetous exalting the production of capital as thrift and the production of consumable wealth as extravagance. Whereas the physical basis of perpetual interest is not in the production of capital, but solely in its use in producing the first category of wealth, consumable wealth. Its use in producing perishable wealth is permanent, but it's in producing permanent wealth, it is ephemeral. For possessions like capital accumulate. Once a community has accumulated possessions sufficient to enable it to consume its wealth in accordance with the state of the scale of living fixed by its rate of consumption, more possessions, like more capital, become a useless charge and a burden upon the possessors. In brief, both forms of permanent wealth, for different reasons, only accumulate to the point at which they come into equilibrium with the rate of consumption of perishable wealth. In future, if any class in the community desires to live upon interest, it must encourage and not discourage the production of consumable wealth, and discourage the production of capital except as required to produce perishable wealth. Abstinence in this respect, and by abstinence, Sadia means savings, abstinence in this respect might preserve the method of livelihood, like that of ownership of land for an indefinite period, without conflict with physical possibility. In practice, the foregoing simple considerations are invalidated to the extent to which it is possible to export permanent wealth to foreign countries in exchange for consumable wealth, but in the long run, over the whole world, they must be true. This is an important consideration as regards this country. Now, remember, Sadi was an English chemist. This country, which has traditionally, as one of the leaders in the use of mechanical power, has in the past succeeded in exporting considerable quantities of permanent in exchange for perishable wealth. But this can only be a somewhat precarious situation. For as the world fills up, not only do the new countries make more and more of their own machinery, but they consume more and more of the food they produce, unless we again contrive to get the lead in technical inventions in the use of power. It is clear that the ultimate future policy of this country, meaning Britain, will have to be directed towards the home production of consumable wealth, which means its neglected agriculture will have to be revived. In reviving, now that was 1933. Actually, it was 1923 when he wrote that. In contrast to reviving agriculture, let's look at what we as the United States have forced upon ourselves through our inequitable economic policies since 1947 to 49, the latest period of balanced economic operation. This is what we call our T-chart. This is national income. Now, other folks have identified, Bob was talking about gross domestic product divided by population, working hours and things in order to come up with a value for a working hour. At Norm, we use measure of national income, which is defined as all of the income produced or created in the production of our standard of living. Now, gross national product, net national product, gross domestic product, net domestic product, all of those measures are again trying to measure the economic activity of a nation, but they also include duplicate measures, duplicate countings. You aren't sure who got this counted, we'll include it over there as it got turned through the agents of production, and so it's less accurate, I guess, as a measure of our economic performance in producing our standard of living than what we find in our national income figures. So this is based upon Simon Kuznets, another Nobel Prize winner, as was Saudi, who laid out and began his studies of national income. And what he identified was 6 segments to the economy: corporate profits before taxes, small business, rental incomes to persons, that includes copyrights and patent income and stuff like that, and farm income, and wages, salaries, and supplements, and net interest as a figure. I've divided these into what we call the revenue side and the cost side. And in 1947, 48, and 49, this was how the numbers displayed themselves. These are the averages of those 3 years. 33, or 1/3 essentially, of our national income was revenue. 2/3 was cost. That, ladies and gentlemen, is structural balance for this country. This is just a depiction of the same numbers previously in a pie chart. All these numbers are net, by the way. Net farm income, net small business income, net rental incomes, net interest. It's all figured out that way. The effort there is to eliminate duplication. The idea is simply that everybody's expense is somebody else's income. So that is structural balance right there. That was the last time we had it, by the way, 47, 48, 49. This is what it looks like in 2004. Labor, wages, salaries, and supplements has moved upwards from 64.2%, 71.3%. The biggest change, of course, has been this net interest figure. And of course, you can see that the net farm income is now only 3/8 of the national income. That is not structural balance. Now, what we've discovered at NORM, what Carl Wilkin found in his income studies, was this evidence of structural balance. He found it 3 times in the 20th century. It happened from 1910 through 1914. It happened from 1926 through 29. It happened from 1947 to 49. Actually, it happened the 3rd time, from 1942 through 1951. The 3rd time there, that 42 to 51 period, happened by the adoption of public policy. Now this is what was discovered. What Wilkin discovered was a relationship between national income and gross raw materials income. That's the income of mines and farms. Gross production times price equals gross income. It's as simple as that. We make the production. We refuse to price that production in balance with the costs in the rest of the economy. This chart right here shows us how far out of whack we are when you compare it with this one. Because the cost factors here, that is your national cost of production of the standard of living of the United States. And what we're doing, we are not earning, well, wrong button. We are not earning enough income, earned income, to pay ourselves for the production we make, the processing we do, the manufacturing we accomplish, the distribution that takes place, and the retail sales and consumption that make it work. On an annual basis, when you strike a line and sum it all up, we don't have enough earned income. Why? Because we didn't pay the raw materials producers. And because agriculture is 70% of the annual new wealth added to the economy every year, agriculture is the major player. So by refusing to pay the farmers for what they produce, the proper price, we generate a shortage of earned income, which has to be replaced by borrowed money. That's the debt. The increase in the debt. That's what that is, and we pay interest on it. Now, what happened during the balanced periods, this is what I mean by saying that we had the essence of a sound money system. What was happening here, as a result of not having actual sound money, was that the debt can still accumulate. But in order to take this economic standard, add sound money to it, the possibility of debt explosion goes away. Our wealth distribution system makes the whole nation able to provide full employment, maximum income distribution, instead of all the concentration that we've seen over the past years. So this is the essence of what a sound money system does, other than the fact that we still are building debt by using unsound money. This is the gross farm income as a percentage of national income, and in the base period here from 47 to 49, right up in there, you can see that it was right at 16% of the national income. And these days, this is how little we're earning, pricing our product at the farm level. That's all that is. Gross farm income, production times price. You know, we still make the production, but we simply refuse to price it properly. Right down the street here, the Chicago Board of Trade attempts what they call price discovery. Yeah, how ludicrous is that? We know what the price should be. We can calculate it. We've got a base period where we know that the segments of the economy were balanced. We know what the prices were during that period. We know what the Federal Reserve and the private money issuers have done to the buying power of our currency since the last balanced base period. We can figure those ratios and specify exactly what the price of a bushel of wheat should be, exactly what the price of a bushel of corn should be, soybeans, cotton, flax, rye. Those are the major commodities, the bulk of what is produced. We can tell them what the price is. But they prefer their method of manipulation. They prefer their method of, well, it's not supply and demand, as Erhard Pfingsten used to say, it's lie and demand. We know how many people there are in the United States. We know approximately what our consumption was last year. We know how much needs to be produced. We can anticipate the population increase. How stupid are we, and how long are we going to let other people tell us how stupid we must be because they must be in charge? Now, to show you the overall effect of some of this stuff, this is my favorite chart. This blue line down here at the bottom is the Consumer Price Index from 1800 through 2004. Now I've got a base period specified as this one right here. That's the 100 line. So the base period is 1947 to 49. That's our base period, 100. A dollar was 100 cents. And that red line is the deflated or purchasing power value of 1 bushel of wheat, 60 pounds of wheat that didn't exist last year. But it existed this year because a farmer took the time to go out there and use his soil and plant the seeds and have the machinery to tend it and keep it free of diseases and weeds and flood and dry weather, insects, harvest it, and take it to market. Sell it at the first point of sale. Now the little numbers here, there, and yonder are the actual market prices in dollars of that time. So that in 1867, the sale price of a bushel of wheat was $2 and a penny, but it paid off almost $3.30 worth of debt. And yet down here in the year 2000, the market price was $2.57 and it paid off 32 cents worth of debt. Yeah. You know, no wonder this stuff doesn't work anymore. No wonder that the money lenders, the money changers, insist upon the fact that we know nothing about the intricacies of banking. Yeah. Because of what Henry Ford said, remember that? Okay, so what Carl Wilkin expressed eventually was that total raw material income is the profit of operating the United States as a business and represents the possible earnings on all capital investment in the nation. You get that? The limit, the upper limit of the earnings, the possible earnings on all capital investment in the nation is total raw material income, gross raw material income. There's gross raw material income. In the base period, 47 to 49, gross raw material income was about 20% of the national income. That was about what the savings rate was. That's why Wilkin said this. Our savings rate, our possible investment has to come out of savings, unless you're borrowing it, right? And nowadays, we're down here at the 5% level. So we're shorting ourselves on the ability to actually buy, with earned money, the things that we want to do to increase our production of capital, increase our leisure, to the extent we want to balance those two items. The raw products of agriculture, as I said, are about 70% of the raw materials needed to provide our standard of living. In 1947, 48, and 49, what Norm uses as our base period was a time of parity agricultural as national policy. What does agricultural parity do for the national economy? One, it regulates the value of the dollar toward constant purchasing power over time. Two, it establishes an earned income basis versus a fictitious loan basis for values. Three, it provides for the widest income distribution in the population, which means full employment. Four, it puts the nation on the road to solvency. And five, it provides a sound basis for worldwide equitable pricing. And that's due to the fact that this country, this unique geographical entity here, is capable of operating a 98% self-sufficient economy. If you want an example of how people have meddled with our ability to actually produce for our own needs and make ourselves into the shining beacon on the hill that we were supposed to become, look at the history of manganese. Manganese is the starch in steel. Without manganese, you don't get steel out of iron ore. And yet, at one time, this country was the leading steel producer in the world. We're not anymore, of course. But guess how much manganese production happened in the United States when we were the leading steel producer? Not 1 ton. What's our manganese production today? Not 1 ton, despite the fact that we've got proven ores of higher manganese content than any place else in the world. If you want to look for the source of that curious bit of import-export politics, look at the Harriman family. Averill Harriman. W. Averill Harriman. Parity does all these things that I listed, these 5 points, through the fundamental exchange equation. Production times price equals income, that's all it is. And anything less than 100% parity exchange is institutionalized poverty. That's what we've done to ourselves. Now, what I came here to talk about really is how parity works, because this is part of the American Monetary Reform Act. And so here are the items. I've got 7 steps here, just so everybody can kind of figure out how this works. This is excerpted essentially from the words of Carl Wilkin. Carl Wilkin wrote the parity provisions, essentially, that were passed in 1942 as part of the Emergency War Price Stabilization Act after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Number 1. Now remember, we've been lollygagging around in this country without any cash, without any money, for 11 years, 1929 through 1940. 12 years. 41 was 13 years. And in December of 41, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and this country was faced with a stagnant economy that was not producing a thing, essentially. We were producing, we weren't pricing it properly to generate sufficient income to exchange those products. But the price level of agricultural products dropped 54% from 1929 to 1932. National income dropped 54% from 1929 to 1932. And in 1941, late 41, when agricultural prices finally regained their relative levels to 1929, did the nation finally become able to pursue World War II with a productive economy, stood up on its own legs in 6 months from the adoption of the parity policies, fought and won World War II. And the provisions that were adopted stated that for 2 years following the cessation of hostilities, this would be policy. Agricultural parity would be policy. In 49, the rest of it all fell apart. It was taken apart on purpose. That's the subject of Charles Walters' book, Unforgiven. It's the biography of an idea. That's what went on. He describes the whole thing in there, every bloody swing, vicious lie that was hurled. Anyway, here's how parity works. 1, commodity loans on 7 basic crops at 90% of parity, which are callable. Now these can be issued through the Commodity Credit Corporation or USDA, whatever arm they want to use, doesn't matter. Which these loans are callable at a market price of 100% parity. Now the difference here is that these days on a crop loan, it's callable at a date certain. Buyers can outweight borrowers. These loans are callable at a market price. When the market hits the price, the loan is called. That regulates the markets. Now the 7 crops are barley, corn, cotton, oats, soybeans, wheat, and flax. 2, 35% reserve of these crops, which is National Crop Insurance. That's a long position, if you understand that. If you've got the crops in reserve, stored, why do you need to pay people money when they didn't make their crop? Can you eat the money? No. No, a strategic reserve of 35% of those crops maintained as close to the place of production as possible. Number 3, parity import duties. And this is essentially what happened in Malaysia with their money, the capital. The capital exchange controls that were implemented were essentially a tariff on capital, a tariff on money. Tariffs much to everybody's chagrin, are not trade measures. Tariffs are monetary regulation measures. They buffer the difference in purchasing powers between nations, currencies. That's what a tariff, properly operated, that's what a tariff is. If somebody else produces stuff that is valued in a currency that will not buy as much as ours, for example, the Chinese, we need to have a parity tariff that says, okay, we need to elevate the price of that product to our domestic price in order to protect our domestic purchasing ability. Now, this is imported goods. You can see what's happened since we gave up our concept, adopted the idea of free trade, which is a misnomer. There is no such thing as free trade. There's either undervalued products, overvalued products, or properly valued products. That's what there are. There are undervalued currencies, overvalued currencies, or properly valued currencies. And it's the same, you go everywhere. Now the question becomes whether or not an auto worker in New Delhi should be paid the same as an auto worker in Pontiac, Michigan. If we believe that the people in New Delhi should be paid less for their hours of labor than the people in Pontiac, Michigan, then what we're saying is that to you, okay, you people in Pontiac, Michigan, you are the same as the New Delhi residents, auto workers. Well, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Maybe we've got a difference in standard of living here that should be represented in our currency. And if we're going to do that, if we're going to maintain our standard of living, we have to have the parity tariff. The parity tariff fluctuates as the prices of other people's goods rise and fall. We maintain our domestic purchasing power. And we can also develop, because of our 98% self-sufficient economy, we can identify what proper world pricing should be. And if folks want to adopt that as their standard, they can join us. The parity tariff essentially evaporates, as opposed to going and starting a war someplace else. Because we want your oil. How did our oil get under your sand anyway? Number 4, surplus disposal through A, world sales at the world price level with drawback provisions from import duties to absorb the difference between domestic and world price levels. I know it sounds complicated, but it doesn't work that way. B, domestic and world relief. And C, discounts on surplus products as an aid to new industries. This business about surplus I should deal with, I guess, right now. Surpluses are necessary for growth. If you don't have a surplus, you can't grow. And so to penalize agricultural producers because the weather was cooperative, the soil was in good shape, they have done their stewardship well and can now produce more this year than they did last year, and to say, oh, you need to get kicked in the britches for that because now you've got a surplus. You know, this is tantamount to saying, I don't know what, you should have a lobotomy? I don't know, something like that. It's just nuts. It's silly. And we should tell them so, you know, in as many ways as possible. 5, surplus funds from import duties revert to the U.S. Treasury. Any deficits should be considered as the national insurance cost for full employment and sustained national income. And 7, provisions for perishable commodities, strawberries, vegetables, fruits, you know, and minor crops should be conducted through marketing agreements with the producers of those products. This equitable economic approach for monetizing our raw material production, building infrastructure is great, and spending money into circulation is great, and it needs to be done. But we're neglecting the easiest way to make this happen. Farmers make the production. It comes in all the time. Every year, we hope, or we go hungry. The price of those products is the easiest place to spend money into circulation. This equitable economic approach for monetizing our raw material production, issuing sound money, and regulating the value thereof for constant purchasing power over time has been written into a legislative proposal called the National Economic Stability Act. It's available on our website if you want to download it. It's a PDF file and you can look through it. I actually wrote this up and put in the header up here for my congressman and Nick Smith about 3-4 years ago. Sent it to him. And in public gatherings, wherever I would follow Nick Smith around, he was sitting on the House Agriculture Committee. Wherever he was, why, he'd say, he'd point me out, Randy Cook, you're the only person that ever submitted actual legislation to me. The only person in my whole district. Yes, Nick, what did you do with it? Not a thing. So this is our moral dilemma. We've witnessed the energetic pursuit of the supposed benefits of massive debt creation over the last 6 decades. This economic madness has led directly to our current precarious political condition and the prospect of our imminent economic demise as a democratic republic. If we continue with this debt buildup, this type of government will not survive in this geographical region. Now, knowing that the economic policies which are proven and available, do we as a people possess the ethical vigor to pursue an equivalent sustainable investment in the improvement of our general welfare within the conditions of equitable treatment in all matters monetary and economic? Now here's, that's my reading list, my recommended reading list, if anybody has the interest to jump in on them. The one in the upper corner here, this is by Carl Wilkin himself, called Prosperity Unlimited, The American Way. That's Frederick Soddy's book over there, Virtual Wealth and Debt. This is Charles Walters' Unforgiven, 2nd edition. He also wrote the one on the right called Raw Materials Economics, a Norm Primer. The one in the middle I haven't mentioned much, but it's the basis of an indexing value of dollars, how to come up with an index, which is what Soddy was talking about, indexing money values against a basket of wealth. Benjamin Graham, which if anybody knows Warren Buffett, the investor, the hedge fund guy, the guy that just gave most of his money to Bill Gates. Gee, on that. Them that's got shall get, I guess. Them that's not shall lose. So the Bible says, and it still is news. Anyway, yeah, this is what Benjamin Graham, and this is an actual technical treatise on how to do it, how to set up the indexes and the whole thing. And while I don't go right to the wall with everything that's in there, it gives you an example at least of how to set it up and how to make the thing work. Well, I don't know whether I've used up all my time. I'll give my answers to your questions if you want to ask them.
Take about 5 more minutes.
I just want to know how you respond. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Speak a little louder.
Okay. I just wanted to know what your response is. A lot of people say that the farming industry is subsidized by the
Right.
government. I know that's not true, but it just seems frustrating when you talk to people and they say, oh, those farmers,
Right.
they're getting all these subsidies from the government. Yeah, I checked it right.
Well, I'll repeat the question. That's fine. The question is about subsidies, agricultural subsidies, how farmers are subsidized, and it generates a negative perception amongst non-farming people. And yes, farmers are subsidized, and it's wrong. We can see what it's done. The subsidies have taken over only when the earned income dropped. As government's response to having a gutted, sound agricultural parity policy, then they still found out here that, oh gosh, there's still a problem out there. Oh golly, what are we going to do? Well, let's write some checks. And so you got farmers out here that are farming in the mailbox, you know, looking for that check. Well, it's wrong. It's damaging. It's destructive. What needs to happen? Farmer wants to earn his dollar in the marketplace. And if you're a legal scholar and you want to look it up in the U.S. Code, look up Title VII, which is the agriculture section in the United States Code. Title VII, Section 601 and 602. 7 U.S.C. 602 says that the Secretary of Agriculture shall regulate the markets in interstate commodities so as to establish as the prices to farmers parity prices. That's what 7 U.S.C. 602 says today. That's current law.
Here's my question. What is the number one reason why farmers can't raise their prices?
Because they produce an undifferentiated commodity.
What does that mean?
That means that they're producing a bulk unit. In other words, one farmer produces corn, another farmer produces corn, many farmers produce corn in many places. And all of that corn may get consumed eventually, but it all comes to market at approximately the same time. And you wind up with 365 days of supply, 1 day of demand. That's why a farmer can't raise his price. A farmer is a price taker.
Testy. Aren't most farms corporate farms, not individual farmers?
No, not most, no. There's about 22%. Maybe of corporate farms. The large percentage of actual farms are small farms. The bulk of production that occurs is from the large farms on the bulk commodities. I have a brother-in-law who is not a corporate farmer, but he farms about 2,700 acres. Cash crops. That's one of the outcomes, by the way, the consolidation of the land, ownership and operational control. That's one of the results of our bad money and our bad economic policy, is the concentration of ownership. We see it in corporate control. We're seeing it in agriculture. We've already seen it in government. Government's taken over everything. And then, of course, there's the World Trade Organization. I mean, we take over, or we took over WTO.
Most corporate farms are, in fact, family farms who have incorporated to get tax laws for them.
That's correct, yep. Most of them are that way, that's right.
Two more questions.
Yes, sir.
What happens, who pockets the export subsidies on farm products?
Export subsidies are who pockets the export subsidies on farm products, and that is the exporter, not the farmer.
That's what I thought.
Right, yeah. We have a program called the Export Enhancement Program through USDA, and yep, whoever exports this. I mean, the farmer is the original source of the wealth, but there's a fellow that used to teach at Michigan State University, Kenneth Boulding, used to describe civilization this way. He said, civilization is a process whereby people who don't live in cities produce more than they can consume, and we have a means by which we can take it away from them and give them as little as possible in return.
Political science.
That was this, and he taught at Michigan State University, and that was his description of civilization.